How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, I wasn't going to do a video today, but I decided I have to. And this is if Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death is ruled an overdose. Because right now, and it hasn't been ruled anything yet, but right now I'm watching stuff that's being put out by TMZ and just people that are trying to push the narrative away from D4VD, away from his camp, away from anybody that had any involvement with D4VD. And now the thing is, hey, it could be an overdose. And it looks like they're trying to minimize some level of accountability. Now, we're still waiting for the toxicology report to come back. As recording of this, we don't know what the results are yet. And I've done videos on it could be a possible overdose. And I did that September 24th and September 26th. We covered all the possible motives, even before it hit the mainstream. So if you guys want to take a look, it's in my older videos, including the cult-like fashion of dismembering a body, which may not even be the truth at this point. But with that said, guys, we have to still remember that even if there is an overdose, there still is responsibility. At a higher level, there's still accountability. She was a minor. So I don't want to push the narrative that, oof, it's an overdose. So technically everything is on this 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old girl, because we know she never made it to her 15th birthday. So everything was on her. No, who introduced her to these things when she was 11, 12, 13, 14? Who introduced her to partying? We don't know. But the point is more than just introducing, who gave her stuff so she can party, so she could drink, so she could smoke. I mean, if the songs that David wrote are truly about her, which we don't know yet either, it does talk about them getting high and all these other things together. I mean, that's something I would expect people to look into. So it doesn't close the door on involvement. It opens up a door into another perspective of involvement. Still a lot of shit there. So I have a couple of things I just want to mention real quick. So the legal frame is overdose is not a free pass. So you got the cause versus responsibility. Even if the medical examiner lists overdose as a cause of death, that does not erase culpability of people who provided, facilitated, or ignored the risk tied to the drugs. Minor status, Celeste was under 18. The law places a higher duty of care on adults around her, and in many states, providing drugs to a minor is automatically an aggravated felony, regardless of whether the adult intended harm. And the bad batch factor. If the drugs contain fentanyl or were otherwise adulterated, those who supplied them could face homicide level charges. Fentanyl delivery resulting in death, involuntary manslaughter, or reckless endangerment. These are still serious charges that outline that person's responsibility, that person's accountability. The fact that now we're minimizing it to, it could have been an overdose. The minimization makes it look like she is fully responsible for that choice. Even adults aren't fully responsible for that choice nowadays. If someone's given a bad batch, they're going to look at the person that sold it to them, because either way, maybe the person's intent, which is still not right, is to take drugs, but it wasn't to die. Degrees of responsibility. So direct suppliers, whoever actually gave or sold Celeste the drugs, could face distribution to a minor, which is among the harshest drug offenses in U.S. law. If fentanyl is involved, many states and federal laws elevate this to a homicide statute. So you don't just even have the person who sold the drugs to whoever. If they weren't selling it directly to Celeste, it could be the person who sold the drugs to the supplier of who eventually gave it to Celeste. So you never know. I'm sure if there was drugs involved, let's say hypothetically, there's a chance that maybe David didn't handle with those direct exchanges, but he could have been the one who was closest to Celeste that gave it to her. So you got the supplier, the people that got the drugs, the people that would eventually give it to David, if that's the case, and then would have given it over to Celeste. That's a world of shit right there. Again, if that's the case, I'm just painting out a picture that overdose does not alleviate accountability. So for anybody that's putting it out there like that, you should be watching this. Passive bystander, people who knew she was overdosing but failed to call 911 may face failure to render aid or criminal negligence charges, depending on jurisdiction. Many states have duty to rescue statutes when minors are involved. And enablers, adults who allowed access, failed to secure substances, or knowingly placed her in a risky environment could be investigated for child endangerment or contributing to the delinquency of a minor. So again, we get rumor mill that this was a party house, and then we get that's from TMZ, and then SF at first says it wasn't, and then maybe there was one party. You know what? I think he's going to look to maybe protect the owner, and then TMZ is looking to create a different narrative that pushes responsibility away from David. You got to wait for LAPD to tell you what's happening, because there's a video clearly that showcases SF saying that it's not known to be a party house, and then later on he kind of back and says, yeah, it was one party. He says one party. And then you got TMZ saying it was no party house. So people are partying. Okay, was a minor there? I mean, we don't even know if actually anything even happened at that house. This house could just be secondary. You know, there could be another property that all this could have happened at. And right now we're spending all our focus on here, when at the end of the day, let LAPD do what they got to do so they can, you know, let us know before we go down rabbit holes and bring out all these conspiracy theories that now they have to check. Because as much as, you know, they got to find out who did it, they also got to eliminate who didn't, or what weren't direct factors. The wrong narrative, blaming the minor, 100% the wrong narrative. You want Celeste you want justice for Celeste. You don't sit there and start switching the narrative and start blaming her. You know, we've seen that as she's a runaway. No, maybe she was groomed. Maybe she escaped. Then you're blaming the home. At the end of the day, the thing is, we know that he had a connection to this young girl. We're trying to figure out what that connection is. And then eventually the girl is found dead in his frunk. So he has a connection to her. And right now we're trying to figure out what that relationship is. And already we're downplaying accountability by saying it's an overdose. So therefore it was her choice. Stop blaming the minor. Please just stop. Even if it was an overdose, we still need responsibility. Who gave her the drugs? Who gave her the bad batch? Who supplied it? It doesn't end when it's just an overdose. So victim versus choice. Framing Celeste as culpable ignores her age, her developmental stage, and the fact that minors cannot legally consent to dangerous adult-level risk, just as they can't consent to alcohol, sex, and adults. Just as they can't consent to alcohol, sex with adults, or contracts. Predatory dynamics. If older teens or adults introduce her to substances, the law sees her as the victim of exploitation, not a willing partner in crime. And systemic blind spots. Overdose is often weaponized as a way to dismiss accountability. She chose this path. But in cases involving minors, that framing collapses under both legal and ethical scrutiny. The potential charges in minor overdose cases, I've seen drug-induced homicide, statutes in many states if fentanyl or opioids are involved, distribution to a minor, federal mandatory minimums possible, involuntary manslaughter, reckless disregard for safety, child endangerment / neglect if adults facilitate or failed to intervene, and then failure to render aid if bystanders did not call emergency services. So now if you look up at each one of these crimes, a drug-induced homicide, that's in California. California does not have a specific drug-induced homicide statute, but prosecutors often pursue second-degree murder under the Watson rule if someone knowingly provides a lethal substance. Range, 15 years to life in state prison. And guys, if you're in a legal system, help me out. Tell me if this is correct. And then federal under 21 USC 841 subsection B1C, if distribution of drugs result in death, the penalty is 20 years to life. If fentanyl involved, federal courts are especially aggressive. So it's not a joke charge. Distribution to a minor. California, providing a controlled substance to a minor is treated very harshly. 3, 6, or 9 years in state prison, enhanced if within 1,000 feet of a school or if the offender is an adult. Federal, 21 USC 859 makes distribution to anyone under 21, especially under 18, a mandatory double penalty. Ranges up to 40 years if serious injury or death results. Mandatory minimum 1 year, even for small amounts. Involuntary manslaughter. California Penal Code has it as a range from 2, 3, or 4 years in state prison. Federal ranges up to 8 years if no prior enhancement. Child endangerment, neglect in California, penal code there, it's likely to cause, if it's likely to cause great bodily harm or death, 2, 4, or 6 years in state prison. If not, likely to cause great harm, up to 1 year. Federal, no direct child endangerment statute like California, but similar charges come through neglect, abuse, or contributing to delinquency under broader statutes. Penalties vary, often up to 2 years, unless paired with other charges. Failure to render aid in California, this is the lesser. Limited Good Samaritan laws protect callers, not bystanders who do nothing. If a minor is involved, prosecutors can stretch this into criminal negligence or even child endangerment. Typically charged as a misdemeanor or enhancement, up to 6 months, 1 year jail, unless paired with other charges. Generally, for federal system, no failure to rescue law unless linked to civil rights violation. So key takeaway, lowest exposure, passive bystander neglect is months to a year. Middle exposure, involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, 2 to 6 years. That's California, up to 8 in federal. And highest exposure, distributions to a minor or drug-induced homicide. California's 9 years to life, feds 20 years to life. In practice, if fentanyl is confirmed in Celeste's system, feds often step in. That means 20 years minimum, life maximum. And guys, again, that's from my research. And one more area I like to close off in is the bigger picture. Even if labeled an overdose, the question isn't, did Celeste make a bad choice? It's who placed her in harm's way, who failed to do their duty to protect her, and who profited or looked away while a minor was endangered. Now, this keeps us focused where it belongs, on the network of accountability, suppliers, enablers, and passive bystanders, on the systemic safeguards that failed, adult supervision, peer oversight, law enforcement intervention, and on ensuring the narrative does not shift responsibility onto a child who should have been protected. So we start seeing these things, or even when it comes up, these are the questions we have to flood right back into those comments of the people that are putting it out there. Because now the narrative is shifting the longer it takes. They're hoping that toxicology in some cases come back as an overdose. And it's like, oh, told you, David was involved in that. Oh, no, hold on. There's still questions that need to be answered because these are still serious charges. She was a minor. And the last thing we want to do, especially for justice for Celeste, is to start finding ways to push it back on her, because that's what's ultimately going to happen. They're going to go into the blame game. And at the end of the day, we lose justice for Celeste. So we got to create shields. And those shields are built on questions that need to be asked to really back those people into a corner so they stop blaming and start taking accountability. Because eventually you'll push past blame until they minimize what they've done. And then eventually it's full accountability. So we have to get past the blame through the minimization to, it's on you. It's on you. Justice for Celeste. And guys, if you like the content, please, I have a Buy Me a Coffee. It's linked in my description. It does help because in the end, as I try to get more guests or try to do a little bit more research, it's good to have some resources that I can utilize to just encourage people to maybe come on, but also to pay for anything that I may have to put forward. As always, guys, stay safe.